so today I have this really big book here. So this book I had found at a thrift store, and so you can see it was $5.50. So you can see it's very, very big there. Lots to look at. You can see how many pages there are there. So I walked by this and I thought, well, this will be perfect for a video. So you can see it is all about the 20th century. An illustrated history of our lives and times. You can see just some of the images that the time was most well known for. Okay, so I'm going to just kind of change the view for you a little to get a little closer, and we'll see what we can get through today in this video, okay? Okay, so let's see here. It's hard to find a good view. This book is so large, so maybe I'll move the camera around a bit. Let's see. Alright, so this is a good page to look at. This is the contents here, and it just sort of breaks the whole century down into decades. It sort of gives it a little title to each decade. So starting in 1900 up until 1909, it says Mysteries of the Unconscious. Freudianism arrives. So that's basically how they summarized that decade up. 1910 to 1919, The Ceaseless Machine, The Coming of Mass Production. And then moving on to 1920, the 1920s, Mixed Messages, The Birth of Mass Culture. Then we have the 1930s, Nations in Goose Step, The Age of Totalitarianism. Then we have the 1940s, Total War, Global Conflict as a Way of Life. The 1950s, Destination Moon, The Dawn of the First Space Age. The 1960s, Age of Innocence, The Cult of the Child. 1970s, A Wolf at the Door, Environmentalism Becomes an Imperative. The 1980s, Information Overload, The Electronic Revolution. And finally, the 1990s, Freedom Ascendant, The Challenge of Democracy. Okay. So now this book, I can't imagine anyone having read this entire book. But there's so much information. So here we have a photo from the 1900s here. And you see all of the people traveling by horse and carriage. So this picture here, let's see, this caption over here, the dawn of the 20th century found humanity still ensconced in the 19th. The verities of God and country had not yet been tested by global war, communist revolution, or the world's inexorable shrinkage by air travel and mass communications. This picture here is taken in France. Paris's Champs-Élysées was as green in 1900 as it had been when a newly ascendant Napoleon commissioned his Arc de Triomphe nearly a century earlier. But across town at the Exposition Universelle were displayed the sorts of high-tech gadgets that would quickly transform the city and the world. Cars replaced horses on boulevards around the planet. Skyscrapers replaced trees, and the clamor of an increasingly industrialized, commercialized society made urban calm an ever scarcer commodity. I always think about this, like when people were traveling by horse, do you think that they felt like, geez, I wish I could just go faster, you know? Or did they not really know because they didn't know how fast they could go? Alright, so I won't get too in detail here. Let's see, the world in 1900, reign of the railroad. Okay. And it gives us the average lifespan. So in 1900, Japan had the highest lifespan, which was women at 45 years of age and men 44 years of age. And the United States, it looks like women had an average lifespan of 51 years old and men 48 years old. And let's see, in Mexico in 1900, women, the average lifespan for a woman was only 34 years old, and for a man only 32. And over here it's a little section called What We Knew. So in 1900, air travel is assumed to be decades away. 2 years before flying the first successful airplane, Wilbur Wright states that man will not fly for 50 years. Automobiles are widely considered impractical, dangerous, and faddish. The horse is here to stay, but the automobile is only a novelty. A bank president tells Henry Ford's lawyer, advising him not to invest in the Ford Motor Company. And here we have synthesized in Germany in 1898 and available in many over-the-counter medicines, heroin, a term coined by the Bayer Company, manufacturer of aspirin, is touted as a cure for morphine addiction, as well as an excellent cough syrup. It is not hypnotic, declares the Boston Medical and Surgical Journal, and there is no danger of acquiring the habit. And let's see down here. Let's see the last one down here. A tropical plague for over 300 years. Yellow fever is thought to result from unsanitary living conditions. Doctors believe that airborne bacteria enter the body via the respiratory system and then lodge in the lungs. Cuban doctor Carlos Finlay's theories, advanced since the 1880s, that the diseases carried by mosquitoes are largely dismissed by the medical community. Now, if you watched my medical terms video, I happen to use that word, yellow fever. And it is, if you remember, transmitted by mosquitoes. Okay, here we have Freud. Caption here, let's see. The pioneer of psychoanalysis, Sigmund Freud, in his study at 19 Berghaus, Vienna, in 1905. Beside him is a plaster reproduction of Michelangelo's Dying Slave. Above, a 15-inch terracotta Eros from Greece, circa 150 to 100 BC. One of at least 6 in Freud's extensive collection of antiquities. For Freud, Eros represented the life instinct, which, he wrote, is locked in constant struggle with Thanatos, the instinct of destruction. Okay. There's this image here. It's still a lot about Freud. Freudian theory and themes have cropped up in popular media throughout the century. In Alfred Hitchcock's Spellbound, 1945, psychoanalysis provided the backdrop as psychiatrist Ingrid Bergman grappled with the thorny problem of whether Gregory Peck was merely a neurotic colleague or a murderous amnesiac. The movie's most memorable sequence was an elaborate dream murder adapted from paintings specially commissioned from Salvador Dali. The surrealist was heavily influenced by Freud, and during the 1930s set out to produce what he called hand-colored photographs of the subconscious. And lots about, let's see, here we have something about, let's see, the camera. This is all about popular culture. Lots more people started reading the newspaper. A camera for the people. You press the button, we do the rest, boasted the ad for the Eastman Kodak Company's remarkable new box. Camera, the Brownie. introduced in 1900. And this book also lists some famous births and famous deaths. I don't think there's any names that I recognize except for Oscar Wilde, an Irish writer, died this year. Here are some predictions for the new century. And this was in Ladies' Home Journal. Let's see, there will probably be from 350 million to 500 million people in America. There will be no C, X, or Q in our everyday alphabet. They will be abandoned because unnecessary. Automobiles will be cheaper than horses. Then we move on to 1901. First long-distance radio transmission. Beloved maestro dies. This was Giuseppe Verdi, Italian musician. Queen Victoria is buried. She died January 22nd, 1901. The first Nobel Prizes were given, 1901. Alfred Nobel was a successful industrialist, but an unsuccessful novelist and playwright. The inventor of dynamite, but a committed pacifist. The first Nobel Prizes were finally bestowed by the King of Sweden on December 10th, 1901. Each winner is known as a laureate for the laurel crowns awarded ancient athletes. They received about $42,000. So, this is interesting. He died in 1896, and his relatives were flabbergasted at the provisions of his will. 94% of his vast fortune was to be used to bestow an annual award on a handful of people around the globe whose work in physics, chemistry, medicine, literature, and peacemaking, the economics category was added in 1969, had conferred the greatest benefit on mankind. This year, some births. Walt Disney was born in 1901. Clark Gable was born in 1901. U.S. actor from Gone with the Wind and other things. Alright. So, let's see here. Okay. This page here, we're still in 1901. There's some new things in 1901. Instant coffee. First illusion ride. trip to the moon adventure ride at Pan American Expo in Buffalo, an electric hearing aid, a safety razor made by Gillette, the electric typewriter, and driving school. Let's see. The Barrymore acting dynasty. Ethel Barrymore, an outstanding young actress known for her performance in the 1901 play Captain Jinks of the Horse Marines. Okay. She was an actress for the next 5 decades when her brothers John and Lionel took to the stage in succeeding years. The Barrymores, whose parents had also been actors, became the royal family of acting. And over here, this is about Picasso. Picasso's Blues. So in 1901, he started this sort of blue period. It was speculated that Picasso's use of the color blue, as in this 1901 self-portrait, was a manifestation of schizophrenia. Down here, business and industry, birth of the boom. Early in 1901, just after being rejected by Standard Oil as a drilling ground, Spindletop, a hill outside the town of Beaumont on the East Texas plains, became the most desirable piece of real estate in the world. There was oil underneath Spindletop, oil that gushed 200 feet into the air when drillers struck it. The well blew out 110,000 barrels of Texas crude a day for 9 days before workers could cap it. So, let's see. It was mostly oil's main use at that time was to light lamps, and then the market became saturated and the price dropped to 3 cents a barrel, while speculators all around them went bust. A few prescient capitalists began to explore the use of oil as heating fuel and to power ships and locomotives. Their companies, Gulf, Sunoco, and Texaco, grew rich. And here is all about Booker T. Washington. It's called A Slave Child's Lonely Road. Something that he wrote. Born into slavery and emancipated into bitter poverty, Booker T. Washington rose to become the most prominent black leader and educator of his time. So this is something that he wrote here. Now we're on to 1902. Let's see, births. Ansel Adams was born. He's a U.S. photographer. Ray Kroc was born, U.S. franchiser. I think he's the founder of McDonald's, right? Charles Lindbergh was born this year, U.S. aviator. And John Steinbeck, U.S. novelist. And famous death, Walter Reed, U.S. surgeon. Okay, let's see some things new in 1902. Fan club for English actor Lewis Waller. I don't know who that is. The gas-powered lawnmower. An automat, which was in Philadelphia. The teddy bear, named for Teddy Roosevelt, after he declined to shoot a bear while on a hunting expedition. Crayola brand crayons. Pepsi Cola Company. Nabisco's Barnum's Animal Crackers. The Ritz Hotel in London. And the Tournament of Roses football game, later called the Rose Bowl. And here in the United States, let's see, the genetic key. Columbia medical student Walter Sutton announced in 1902 that all the cells of grasshoppers contain dissimilar pairs of matching chromosomes, a finding that on the microscopic level recalled Mendel's theory that each inheritable trait is controlled by a pair of genetic factors. Sutton hypothesized that chromosomes contain these factors, later called genes, and that their behavior during sex cell division lends a randomness to heredity. His work formed the basis for modern genetics. And over here, Caribbean catastrophe. On the morning of May 8th, 1902, the residents of Saint Pierre, Martinique, the largest town in the French West Indies, were headed for church when the mountain that loomed above their heads exploded. A great mass of flames, wrote an eyewitness, with twisting giant wreaths of smoke, rolled thousands of feet into the air, and then overbalanced and came rolling down. Within minutes, this 17th century colonial capital lay burned and buried in lava. A tidal wave slammed into the harbor, ablaze with flammable rum from ruined distilleries. Few on shipboard lived, and of St. Pierre's 30,000 inhabitants, only a drunk in a jail cell survived Mount Pilay's eruption. Very interesting. Several smaller towns were also destroyed, and hours later a volcano on St. Vincent, touched off by Mount Pilay, killed hundreds. Ash fell as far away as Jamaica, 2 million tons on Barbados alone. Despite U.S. and European aid, St. Pierre never recovered. This is when The Entertainer was written, Ragtime. Okay, we're still on 1902 here. Here's a voice from 1902. A story of 4 little rabbits. The Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter. It started out as a letter to the young son of a former governess. Dear Noel, the letter began, I don't know what to write to you, so I shall tell you a story about 4 little rabbits, whose names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. It ended up becoming the best-selling children's book of all time. It's cute little illustrations there. Okay, now we move on to 1903. The Wright brothers take to the sky. On the morning of December 17th, 1903, in the dunes near the village of Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, Orville and Wilbur Wright shook hands, said a witness, like 2 folks parting who weren't sure they'd ever see each other again. Cold gusts blew as Orville strapped himself face down into the latticework of wood struts, wire, and cotton cloth. Beside him sputtered a tiny homemade engine. This fragile vessel, he hoped, would take him on a world-changing journey, the first controlled flight by a human in a motorized, heavier-than-air craft. Homemade engine. The battle for suffrage. See a picture here. Emeline Pankhurst restrained by police during a 1914 demonstration. In 1890, 13 years before Emeline Pankhurst formed the often violent organization that propelled her to worldwide notoriety, her husband, Richard, asked her a question she would remember the rest of her life. Why don't you force us to give you the vote? Why don't you scratch our eyes out? Although Pankhurst, a full-time mother of 4 small children, was already known in London feminist circles as the founder, with Richard, of a women's suffrage league and the hostess of a radical salon, it wasn't until 1903, 111 years after the publication of Mary Wollstonecraft's Vindication of the Rights of Woman, that she formed the Women's Social and Political Union, if not the most important suffragist organization in Britain, certainly the most notorious. Let's see, who was born? 1903, John Dillinger, U.S. bank robber. Red Grange, U.S. football player. Wow, Bob Hope was born in 1903. Wow, U.S. actor and comedian. I wouldn't have thought he was born so long ago. George Orwell, UK writer. Any famous deaths? Cassius Clay, U.S. abolitionist. Alright, so here we have new in 1903. The postage franking meter, the license plate, the first issued in Massachusetts. Sanka decaffeinated coffee, a complete opera recording, Leon Cavallo's Pagliacci, the Tour de France bicycle race, the Ford Motor Company, Steuben Glass Works, Prix Goncourt French Literary Prize, and the New York Stock Exchange building. Also, in 1903, the first World Series. They were from Boston, defeated the Pirates of Pittsburgh. In the United States, Harley hits the road. In Milwaukee, Wisconsin, draftsman William Harley and the brothers Arthur, Walter, and William Davidson joined forces to build a new kind of motorbike. Low, loud, and gasoline-powered, the first Harley-Davidson rolled off the line in 1903, quickly becoming the country's most popular motorcycle. The Harley Hog provided a lasting symbol of the wide-open American road. And also Hershey's Chocolate Factory, promising chocolate for the masses. Confectioner Milton Snavely Hershey laid the cornerstone of a new factory at Dairy Church, Pennsylvania in 1903. Let's see what we have over here. Spaceman, inspired by the science fiction of Jules Verne, Russian aeronautic theorist Konstantin Tsiolkovsky applied his wide-ranging mind to space travel, publishing in 1903 The Exploration of Cosmic Space by means of reaction devices. Stunningly insightful, the work posited liquid fuel as the only means to power rockets in space, and foresaw the necessity of multi-stage rocket design. His prescient theories were borne out by modern developments in rocketry. Here, measuring heartbeats, invented in 1903 by Dutch physiologist Willem Eindhoven. The electrocardiogram, or EKG, unlocked the secrets of the human heart by measuring and recording the natural electrical pulse of heartbeats. Eindhoven's clinical instrument allowed physicians to observe cardiac irregularity and diagnose heart disease. Now a basic tool in cardiac care, the EKG won Eindhoven the 1924 Nobel Prize for Physiology and Medicine. So this is all still in 1904. A landmark graduation. I had a joyous certainty that deafness and blindness were not an essential part of my existence, since they were not in any way a part of my immortal mind, wrote Helen Keller, after her graduation from Radcliffe College in 1904. The event was a watershed in the life of a woman who, through her writing on behalf of women's suffrage, socialism, and the rights of the handicapped, became an international symbol of what anarchist Emma Goldman appreciatively called the almost illimitable power of the human will. And births, let's see, William Count Basie, U.S. musician. Bing Crosby, U.S. singer. Salvador Dali, Spanish artist, born in 1904. Let's see, Cary Grant, U.S. actor. And let's see, anything else? B.F. Skinner, U.S. psychologist, was born. Okay. Let's see here. New in 1904, Times Square. It had been Longacre Square until the New York Times moved to Broadway and 42nd Street. New in 1904, the double-sided gramophone disc. A metal-encased vacuum flask or thermos. Novocaine. Campbell's pork and beans. Tea bags, just plain old tea bags. Okay, National Ski Association. Okay. In the United States, the New York City subway, clean and bright with gleaming new cars. The first section of New York City's subway opened in 1904, running from the Brooklyn Bridge uptown to Broadway at 145th Street. What else? The rise of Roosevelt's. Let's see. Pavlov wins the Nobel Prize. When he won the 1904 Nobel, Ivan Pavlov had barely begun the behavioral experiments that made Pavlovian a household word. Dogs taught to associate food with, say, a ringing bell, would then salivate whenever they heard the bell, a learned response that the Russian physiologists called a conditional reflex. Rather, the Nobel Committee was recognizing his years of research on digestive glands, which he'd begun in 1890. Around the world, Secrets of the Sacred abandoned to the jungle. Secrets of the Sacred. Abandoned to the jungle, the wells and pyramids and ball court of the ancient Mayan city of Chichen Itza remained largely undisturbed for half a millennium. Although excavations had begun in the late 19th century, an expedition led by amateur archaeologist and U.S. Consul to Mexico, Edward Thompson, in 1904 uncovered the most remarkable finds to date. His search, which centered in the sacred well, a prominent Mayan religious site, turned up the tools, jewelry, and golden ornaments. Many illegally spirited back to the United States of an advanced civilization. Here is in theater, a fantasy of eternal youth. Here's a quote. I have written a play for children, wrote J.M. Barrie to the American actress Maud Adams in 1904. I should like you to be the boy and the girl, and most of the children and the pirate captain. The play was Peter Pan, the ultimate fantasy of eternal youth. A year later, Adams opened in the title role in New York and thoroughly appropriated the character. For the next 20 years, the sprightly, vivacious actress made Peter Pan a career, starring in countless revivals before a cumulative audience of more than 2 million. Okay. And here we have Wishing Upon a Book from the Montgomery Ward catalog. So it was the first catalog, mail order catalog. The world's founded in 1872, the Chicago-based company freed pre-mall rural Americans from their dependence on the local general store and provided them with a full Saturday night's entertainment. The catalog showcased furnishings and fashion, farm equipment and guns, toys and pets, all sold with a money-back guarantee. A few years later, the catalog of Sears, Roebuck & Company surpassed Montgomery Ward's as the #1 wish book in the United States. Some pictures here of the catalog entries. We're into 1905. Okay, 1905. Okay. Einstein's special theory of relativity. Let's see about this one. In a flurry of activity unlike any seen before or since in the history of science, an unknown 26-year-old German-born patent examiner in the National Patent Office in Bern, Switzerland, published 3 papers in the German scientific journal Annalen der Physik that are among the world's most important achievements in theoretical physics, more than enough to secure the author's greatness if he had ever or never written another word. Within a few years, the brightest scientific thinkers of the age were hailing him as a new Copernicus. During his lifetime, he became universally recognized as the foremost thinker of the century. His very name, Albert Einstein, became synonymous with genius. The 1905 papers were written in an unusual, highly literate style, containing little mathematics and few references to scientific precedents, The logic was natural and complete. It was as if the author had been shown the inner workings of the universe and recorded what he had seen. In one of the 3 papers, Einstein explained Brownian motion, the random movement of particles suspended in fluid. He correctly attributed the movements to the collisions between the component molecules of the particles and the fluid. Before this explanation, many scientists still doubted the atomic structure of the universe. Afterward, no one could. A second paper, which earned Einstein the 1921 Nobel for Physics, dealt with the photoelectric effect, how light is radiated. Confirming a hypothesis advanced 5 years earlier by Max Planck, Einstein demonstrated that light is emitted and absorbed in quanta, small bursts, rather than continuous waves. This work became the basis for modern quantum theory. And the third paper introduced the special theory of relativity. Einstein showed that space and time, formerly believed to be absolutes, are relative. Only the speed of light is constant, independent of the observer. Einstein postulated that as an object's velocity approaches the speed of light, its length shortens, its mass increases, and time slows. At the speed of light, an object would have a length of 0, an infinite mass, and time would cease to exist. This impossibility led Einstein to conclude that, therefore, nothing can move equal to or faster than the speed of light. The special theory of relativity toppled the assumptions of 2 centuries of Newtonian physics. With it, Einstein integrated space and time and created a new 4-dimensional geometry of the universe. Okay. Any famous births here? Christian Dior, French fashion designer, was born. Henry Fonda, U.S. actor. Greta Garbo, Swedish U.S. actress. Howard Hughes, U.S. aviator and industrialist. Max Schmeling, German boxer. And famous deaths, Jules Verne, French writer. New in 1905. Norway, independence gained from Sweden after 91 years of union. The self-measuring gas pump in Fort Wayne, Indiana. The Rotary Club. The electromagnetic seismograph. The chemical fire extinguisher. Vicks VapoRub, which was marketed as Vicks Magic Croup Salve. Palmolive soap. Variety. The Spiegel mail order catalog. And the National Audubon Society. This is all 1905. And here. Okay. Nickel pleasures. The advent of the Nickelodeon in 1905 gave America, especially its working class, a way to satisfy a newfound lust for the flickers. Small theaters converted from storefronts. Nickelodeons charged 5 cents, hence the name, for a 20 to 30 minute showing of a series of short subject films. They proved so popular that within 3 years, more than 10,000 were in operation across the country. Never knew that before. Okay, so 1906, we have theater. This is Norway's dramatist of ideas. It says, I hold that that man is in the right, said, I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's either Henrik or Henrik Ibsen, who is most closely in league with the future. For most of his life, the Norwegian playwright, who died at 78 in 1906, followed his own dictum, enduring poverty, rejection, and self-imposed exile in Germany and Italy in order to pursue his drama of ideas. A conscious rejection of the 19th century model of the well-made play, a plotty, sentimental creation in which social issues were either avoided or couched in melodrama, and conventional morality ruled. Ibsen's work was at once shockingly frank and subtly symbolic. His central theme was always the protagonist's struggle to be true to him or herself, whatever the consequences. Works like A Doll's House, whose heroine boldly leaves her respectable husband, and Ghosts, in which a deceived wife's loyalty lands her with a syphilitic baby, were too closely aligned with the future for most Victorian playgoers. Conservative critics called his plays revoltingly suggestive and blasphemous. But to his reverential successors, he was the father of modern theater. See, I never knew that. I remember we had to read that book in high school, and I did not even read it because I didn't think it was interesting enough. But now that I read this, I see why they had us read that and why it was important. Okay, and over here, San Francisco gets shaken. On the Richter scale of 1 to 10, the San Francisco earthquake was a 9. One survivor likened it to a bulldog with the city a rat shaken in the grinding teeth. The shaking began at 5:16 a.m. on April 18th, 1906, and ended 47 seconds later. Most of the city's buildings still stood at that moment. In an area that probably averaged 15 minor quakes a year, flexible wood was the construction material of choice. But the new $6 million City Hall was made of stone and brick, and it collapsed like a giant house of cards. Hotels set on landfill slid down hillsides. The cupola of the California Hotel crashed through the roof of the firehouse where San Francisco's fire chief slept, burying him in the rubble. But when the fires started leaping from broken gas pipes, fallen lanterns, crossed electric wires, wood became the enemy. Firemen raced from blaze to blaze only to find all water mains severed. The flames spread unimpeded, spanning 3,400 acres, burning for 3 full days, and in the end more than 28,000 buildings were destroyed. Over half of San Francisco's 450,000 people lost their homes. Some 670 were known to be dead. Another 350 were missing. And it says it burned, let's see, one San Franciscan, noting the survival of an infamous distillery, responded with this poetic question. If, as some say, God spanked the town for being over frisky, why did he burn the churches down and save hodling's whiskey? Now for some births in 1906. Josephine Baker, U.S. French entertainer. Aristotle Onassis, Greek shipping magnate. Roberto Rossellini, Italian filmmaker. Any deaths? Susan B. Anthony, U.S. suffragist. Pierre Curie, French chemist. And Ibsen, Norwegian playwright. Okay, over here we have new in 1906, lifeguards. Lifeguards in Sydney, Australia. Electric washing machine. The Victrola milk cartons, introduced by G.W. Maxwell in San Francisco. The name hot dog from a cartoon showing a Dachshund inside a Frankfurter bun. Permanent waves, introduced in England at a cost of $1,000, taking 8 to 12 hours. The Fuller Brush Company from Hartford, Connecticut. The Wassermann test for syphilis. The SOS distress signal. It replaced CQD, call adopted 2 years earlier. The Mack truck. And Le Mans Grand Prix auto race. Okay. We have the Brownsville Affair. On August 13th, rifle shots interrupted the midnight calm in Brownsville in southern Texas. One white man died, another was wounded. In a town already twisted by racial tension, the mayor quickly blamed black infantrymen garrisoned at nearby Fort Brown. Despite their pleas of innocence, supported by the testimony of white commanding officers, 167 black soldiers were dishonorably discharged. They were not vindicated until 1972. Okay, 1906 still. where the elite meet to eat. This is a special menu from Delmonico's restaurant. Abraham Lincoln, a frequent patron of Delmonico's restaurant in New York, once said to owner Lorenzo Delmonico, "In Washington there are many mansions, but alas, we have no cooks like yours." He was not alone in his sentiment. From a small wine shop opened in 1825, Delmonico's grew into the nation's preeminent dining establishment, serving such notables as Charles Dickens, Jenny Lind, and Ulysses S. Grant. So it's a menu that they had. Then we move on to 1907. Great ships on the high seas. This is the Lusitania. The waterfront in Liverpool, England was crowded with 200,000 cheering people as the Lusitania set off on its maiden Atlantic crossing in September 1907. With the launching of this grand ocean liner and its sister ship, the Mauretania, 2 months later, Britain's Cunard Steamship Company Limited hoped to usher in a new era of transatlantic travel. The vessels were the biggest, fastest, most lavishly appointed ships ever built. The Lusitania crossed from Ireland to New York in 5 days, 54 minutes, 6 hours faster than any before. So then I guess it was about 5 years later, the Titanic. Okay, births. Let's see any famous births in 1907. Katharine Hepburn, U.S. actress. William Levitt, U.S. builder. James Michener, U.S. novelist. John Wayne, U.S. actor. Okay, let's see what's new in 1907. Movie titles instead of commentators. Canned tuna fish, San Pedro, California. The helicopter, designed by Frenchman Paul Cornu. Household detergent, which was Persil. Ski school, well, in the Austrian Alps. Armstrong linoleum. Canada Dry, pale dry ginger ale. L'Oreal perfume and beauty products in France. The United Methodist Church, Oklahoma, the 46th state. Wow. Bullock's, Los Angeles, and Neiman Marcus in Dallas, department stores. In the United States, European women come to America. So big immigration flow here. The steamship Baltic arrived in New York on September 27th, 1002, with 1,002 unmarried Old World beauties on board. A band played Cupid's Garden as a throng of bachelors welcomed America's newest immigrants. "They tell me," said one maiden, that there are no men but millionaires in Pittsburgh. I'm going there. Okay. I wonder if she found one. Okay. And over here we have, in 1907, the first modern zoo. Decades before animal rights and environmentalism would loom large in the popular consciousness, a German animal trainer named Karl Hagenbeck opened in 1907 an ambitious, radically new type of zoo that redefined the relationship between captive animals and the Homo sapiens who come to view them. At that time, most zoos exhibited animals in improbably small, rigorously armored and barred cages. Hagenbeck, who had campaigned against the use of needlessly cruel techniques in training wild animals, came up with a way to display animals in close approximations of their natural habitats. Hagenbeck had purchased the 67-acre site in the outskirts of Hamburg in 1902 and spent 5 years developing it. Through careful study and frequent experimentation, he found the optimum balance between spectators' safety and their immediacy to animals. Let's see over here in the United States. The Emperor of Air. An eccentric American physicist named Lee de Forest greatly hastened the arrival of widespread radio broadcasting when he patented in 1907 his invention of a triode vacuum tube that amplified weak radio signals. Simple and expensive, the Audion, as the tube was named, soon became the standard in all radio sets. Said its inventor, "I discovered an invisible empire of the air." Okay, let's see. Still in 1907. Comics hit the dailies. Let's see, it says, the criticism was scathing. It is not quite clear what these comics are. We cannot call them caricatures, for a caricature is based or aimed at something that exists, wrote a disgruntled reader. But these effigies have no actual relationship with anything that is to be seen upon our earth. The naysayers were outnumbered, however, and in 1907 the comic strip Mr. A. Mutt, about the misadventures of a tall, hapless racetrack junkie, settled in at the San Francisco Chronicle, running 6 days a week in its racing pages. Cartoonist Bud Fisher later introduced a short, top-hatted, bewhiskered character named Jeffries to the strip. He and Mutt met in an insane asylum, and the enduring tandem of Mutt and Jeff was born. Their huge popularity ensured the permanence of daily comic strips and added an idiom to American English. Picture down here. Then over here, the Gibson girl goes to court. Let's see, Emeline Nesbitt was a 16-year-old chorus line dancer when she met Stanford White, a prominent New York architect famous for his lavish entertainments and philandering. White was nearly 50 when he began his affair with the hauntingly beautiful Nesbitt. She went on to have a brief dalliance with actor John Barrymore, and then took a new lover, the extravagantly rich and mentally unstable sadomasochist Harry Kendall Thaw of Pittsburgh. Thaw married Nesbit in 1903, knowing of her earlier affair, but tormented by jealousy. On the night of June 25, 1906, in the outdoor restaurant atop the Madison Square Garden building White had designed, Thaw pulled a pistol from his evening clothes, walked up to White's table, and fired 3 shots at point-blank range into the rival's head. At her husband's trial for murder early the next year, he pleaded insanity. Nesbit was the star defense witness, repeating to the court the story she'd told Thaw about White's drugging and raping her. The trial ended in a hung jury, and in a second trial, Thaw was acquitted. Within 3 weeks of the verdict, the two were negotiating a divorce. Thaw died in 1947 at age 76. He spent the rest of his life in and out of trouble and insane asylums. I'd like to read about that. Here's some testimony from the trial. I may use this in another video. Okay, now we're on to 1908. Ford introduces the Model T. I will build a car for the great multitude, vowed Henry Ford in 1908 as he unveiled the Model T, the car that sold the world on automobiles and spawned assembly line production, thereby launching a second industrial revolution. Durable, lightweight, extraordinarily flexible, the Model T stood up to rough country roads, creating a market for cars among rural working people, a vast share of all Americans in 1908. And let's see, any births? Names that I know. Milton Berle, U.S. comedian. This is 1908. Joan Crawford, U.S. actress. Betty Davis, U.S. actress. Anne Fleming, UK novelist. Thurgood Marshall, U.S. Supreme Court Justice. James Stewart, U.S. actor. And deaths, Grover Cleveland, U.S. President. Let's see what's new in 1908. The horror film, a one-reel production of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Gideon Bibles in hotels. Paper cups, introduced by Public Cup Vendor Company in New York. Silencers for firearms. X-Lax, chocolate-flavored laxative. Monosodium glutamate, which is MSG. And the Christian Science Monitor, Boston. Down here, women and cigarettes. A young woman named Katie Mckay became the first and only casualty of New York City's short-lived war on smoking equality. Caught puffing on a city street in 1908, Mckay was arrested for violating the 2-day-old Sullivan Ordinance, which banned public smoking by women. The ordinance's sponsor, Little Tim Sullivan, believed cigarettes impaired a woman's dignity. "We can leave that to the courts," he said when asked about constitutionality. An embarrassed mayor soon struck down Sullivan's law. Mckay walked. Okay. Let's see. We're still in 1908 here. This is The Walking Bed from Little Nemo in Slumberland by Windsor Mckay for the New York Herald, July 1908. This American cartoonist Windsor Mckay's Little Nemo in Slumberland, which ran in James Gordon Bennett's daily, the New York Herald, was one of the most popular serial comic strips of its day. Translated into 7 languages, Little Nemo spawned a Broadway musical, several animated films, and dolls and games. In the famous Walking Bed episode, Mckay demonstrated his genius by breaking out of the conventional comic strip form of uniformly sized stills to capture the surreal dream of the quiet, anxiety-ridden Little Nemo, which means no one in Latin, and his impish, cigar-smoking dreamland companion, Flip. We have 1909, so we're in the last year of this decade. Okay. Story of the year: Peary claims the North Pole. Ever since Henry Hudson attempted to find the Northwest Passage through North America as a short way to get from Europe to Asia, explorers had been trying to reach the top of the globe. 3 centuries later, the task suddenly seemed urgent. Earth's uncharted regions were dwindling, and no place was more remote than the polar zones. It was a matter of national as well as personal glory. Even if planting a flag in an ice cap brought a country no material benefit, the prestige value was incalculable. The first such conquest occurred in 1909 when U.S. Navy Commander Robert Peary arrived at the North Pole, or came close enough to satisfy most experts. Here we have in medicine the disease of ill repute. Before German bacteriologist Paul Ehrlich discovered compound 606 in 1909, syphilis was a rampant international killer. In Paris alone, the disease of ill repute caused more than 3,000 deaths a year. Transmitted almost solely by sexual contact, syphilis was considered incurable. Its victims were doomed to a grim, often protracted course of infection that led from skin ulceration to degeneration of the skeletal system to destruction of the cardiovascular system to death. Ehrlich, whose work in immunology had won him a Nobel Prize the previous year, changed all that. Experimenting in his laboratory, he injected syphilis-infected rabbits with varying dosages of arsenic-based chemical compound he had devised. After repeated attempts, the rabbits recovered. A couple of weeks later, he repeated the experiment on more severely infected rabbits. Within 3 weeks, they too were symptom-free. Ehrlich had not only discovered the first effective cure for syphilis, he had legitimized chemotherapy as a modern medical practice. Okay. Let's see now, 1909 births. Francis Bacon, UK painter. Agnes de Mille, US choreographer. Let's just go down here a little bit. And deaths. Okay. Still in 1909. New in 1909. The intrauterine device, the IUD, invented by Dr. Richter, made from silkworm gut. Okay. Lipton's tea, the enclosed double-decker bus, kibbutz in Palestine, the electric toaster, and Selfridge's department store in London. And down here we have the age of plastics. The material substance of modern life was ineluctably altered in 1909 when Leo Baekeland announced his invention of Bakelite, the first synthetic polymer. 4 years earlier, Baekeland, a Belgian-born American chemist, had begun developing a synthetic alternative to shellac, an organic polymer used to make varnish. What he ended up producing was a hard, indissoluble substance that could be molded into different shapes. It looks promising. Let's see. Have applied for a patent for a substance which I shall call, it's either bakelite or bakelite. He wrote in his diary. He had stumbled into the age of plastics. Commercial production of bakelite began within a year, and soon everything from billiard balls to electrical insulation was made of the inexpensive new substance. Buoyed by the success of bakelite, scientists around the world redoubled their experimentation, hoping to get rich inventing the next wonder substance. And here we have this little baby thing here. It says it's the, I don't know how to pronounce it, Cupid doll. New York illustrator Rose O'Neill's drawings of chubby, top-knotted cherubs became the basis of an international fad. It was first turned into a line of celluloid dolls, then as the public's appetite for the creatures proved insatiable, extended to a host of products, greeting cards, tableware, and jewelry, sold wildly for 2 decades. Income tax. A resolution for the 16th Amendment to the Constitution authorizing a federal income tax was passed by Congress in 1909 before being submitted to the states for ratification. The resolution arose from dissatisfaction with the high tariffs and excise taxes that were the federal government's primary support. An earlier income tax law had been declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. The amendment was ratified in 1913, and the first such tax was enacted October 31st, 1913. Its flat rate on annual incomes over $3,000 for a single person and $4,000 for a married couple meant that only a tiny percentage of Americans was subject to the levy. What else do we have here? 1909. Monsieur Blériot flies across the channel. I think that's how to pronounce it. Louis Blériot made the first successful overseas flight in a heavier-than-air aircraft when he piloted an airplane of his own design from, Calais, France? Calais? I don't know. Calais. C-A-L-A-I-S. Across the English Channel to Dover, winning international fame and a prize of £1,000 offered by the London Daily Mail. The aircraft looked like an elegant insect, was a monoplane constructed of steel tubing, ash, and bamboo, with a fabric covering and bicycle-type wire landing wheels. It was powered by a 25-horsepower, 3-cylinder engine and had a top speed of about 40 miles per hour. The airplane had no flaps or ailerons and was maneuvered by warping the entire wing. His flight only lasted 37 minutes, but it focused world attention on the economic and military potential of the airplane. Okay, so that was the last year of the decade. And I guess that's where we will stop today. So, that was a lot. I guess what I would kind of think of with this decade is a lot of very important things happened. You would sort of think that we are so advanced now, but looking back at what kind of happened during these years, there was a lot more really, really important advances made and discoveries, and so let me see, how did they categorize this decade again? They categorized this as mysteries of the unconscious. I don't know why they focused so much on Freud for this decade. There was so much more that happened. But anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this very long reading video.